Get ready to be amazed. We did it. It's quite a difficult one to gauge, to be honest. It's a disaster. We have purple. I think this is my nicest one to date. Oh, you guys are in for a serious treat with this one. As today we're putting together a proper water-cooled, fully modded PC. And today we're actually going to be doing a proper Valentine's Day PC. Because if I haven't screwed everything up, this video should be coming out on Valentine's Day. Hooray! This case is the Battle Cruiser, and this is actually a really nice size. So we're going to be doing a CPU and a GPU loop, but we're going to put a 280mm radiator at the top, and then we're going to put a 120 at the back. The paint that we're using is this RWX stuff. We really don't need to do too much at all. I've got my little workstation set up here, and I've got some stencils. Let's go for nice and light. And that's way too heavy. It's not stuck. It's a disaster. Let's try the metal front panel though. And it doesn't want to stick to that either. Bad idea. Oh, and it's even gone through the gloves. The main problem is a bit of a big one, which is that the paint doesn't actually want to stick to the different case components. It worked okay on different motherboard bits and pieces. I've done that before, which is why I was quite confident. What I have found though that actually does work quite well is if you draw it on with hand. I've still used the stencils, but if you were very artistic, shame I'm not, you would be able to do this completely freehand. So let's get this thing built up, then we can start talking about our loop. The first piece of the puzzle is this B550 motherboard from Gigabyte. It is their Vision range, and they do actually have a graphics card as well, but as we're water cooling this, I think they wouldn't have been very happy if I was going to take it apart. The Ryzen processor that we're using here is the 5900X, and this is a 12-core processor, which is going to be very useful in a whole range of applications, not only gaming, but if you want to do gaming and other things on the side, maybe some streaming, some productivity, but fundamentally it does actually get quite warm, even with some pretty beefy cooling solutions. It's one of the chips that I think you'd gain quite a lot from actually doing a custom loop. Corsair really helped out by sending a load of HydroX liquid cooling gear out for this, and I'd say that this is probably one of the best themed water blocks we could actually get for the CPU because it is a sort of frosted white, which is going to go perfectly on the motherboard and will not only do a very good job of keeping our CPU nice and cool, but will look good in the process. And it has RGB. It's going to give us a great white base for the rest of our components, especially once we get that tubing and that fluorescent pink solid coolant. That was actually quite a hard thing to say. Going round, I think we have a nice little loop. Next up, we have our lovely white memory. This is the D50 from XPG. We've used this quite a lot on the channel actually, and they've actually sent out a whole nother kit. So now we've got 32 gigabytes of 3600 megahertz RAM. We're going to populate all 4 slots, and it's going to look glorious. Glorious! That was my big boy voice. Last stick. Yes! There we go. Shouldn't really throw my motherboards around, but you can see perfect white top, and then we've got a few black accents, and then the GPU should go down the bottom. We do have some SSDs. We've got a mixture for the more serious connoisseur, I guess. We've got PCI Gen 4. This is a really nice one actually because it's not ridiculously expensive. This is the S50 Lite. And then we also have the RGB kit, the more fun SSD, and this one's going to look fantastic in the motherboard whilst giving you great PCI Generation 3 speeds. When you're installing SSDs, do remember to put the Gen 4 one at the top, as this is the only one that actually has those Gen 4 lanes straight to the CPU, and you'll be able to utilize that full speed. Let's pop this inside of our case though, shall we? Trying not to touch the probably very tacky paint of Valentine's Day. That would be an absolute disaster. Get ready to be amazed. Check it out. How is this not a dream combo? Lovely white case, lovely white motherboard, all of the trimmings. This is going to look sick. Next up we have our radiators. We'll start with a 120 that we're going to be putting at the rear. Look how cute it is. I don't often see 120s, not even in like all-in-ones. Most people just don't sell them anymore. Whereas this is essentially going to turn our 280 into a 400mm radiator, so all the surface area is better. Respect to XPG though for actually putting rubber dampening on their fans. You don't always see that on case fans, and it's much appreciated. Progress has been made. We've changed the radiator round so that the pipes are at the bottom. We then put the 280 at the top. It looks pretty clean, but now we actually need to install our graphics card, which would normally be very easy. We'd just pop this in and it would be done. But of course we need to put the water block on this. This is of course also in the HydraX range. This is the XG7, and it's changed a little bit versus the old version because it has a slightly different look. I believe they've improved the RGB, and that's not actually a joke. But more importantly, the tolerances have actually improved as well. So you have a very hard time breaking this, so they tell me. I don't think it matters how many times you've done this before. This is going to be the most nerve-wracking bit, I think, of any water-cooled build, because essentially you're taking apart your prized possession. The good news though is that Corsair do make it incredibly easy to actually make the switch, and if you do go for something like this Zotac card that isn't a Founders Edition, then you actually have proper crosshead Phillips screws, so it's a little bit easier to take apart, so the chances of making any mistakes or running into any difficulty requiring a special screwdriver is actually reduced. When you do take apart any graphics card really, do make sure that you are taking pictures as you go so that you know where all of the screws go, and do put all of the screws in a safe place so that you don't lose them if you do need to rebuild the whole thing in the future. We have our back plate removed, probably the easiest bit, and then the most important and most exciting screws, which are the spring-loaded ones that attach directly near the GPU. There's always more screws. You think you're done and you're just not. Aha! We did it! It just required a little bit more force than I would like. I'm like Gamer's Nexus doing a teardown. The really clever thing about the HydraX system though is that because everything is done for you, all of these thermal pads, even the thermal paste is pre-applied, once you've cleaned this card off, you should just quite literally place this on top, screw it in, and that's that. No cutting thermal pads and looking at diagrams. It's all ready to go, easy as pie, at least in theory. The next step is to actually go into your bathroom and find some cotton wool bud Q-tips, are they called? I don't know. I don't deal with that stuff normally, because these are actually really good at getting rid of all of this thermal compound that was pre-applied. Just push this on top of your GPU. Flip it over, grab the little back plate that comes in the box, place this on top so that all of those screw holes actually line up, and then just screw it down. And then when you're done, you should have something that resembles this. It's just a case of putting a load of screws in, or I suppose taking a load of screws out and then putting them back. The main difference in terms of design is this little X that you get at the top, and you can see it almost looks like a stick of RAM. Then it's back to business as usual as we remove our slot covers and then drop in our water-cooled graphics card. Boom! We're going to need a pump. This is the XD3, and I prefer the look of this one over the larger XD5 just because, I don't know, that was almost a bit disproportionate. It needed to be longer, not fatter. We can put this maybe, well, we can put it down there, or it probably is going to look best at the top. I am so sorry about this slightly awkward transition, but I have no choice because, as you can probably tell, it is a brand new day, which makes day 3 of this project. And things are going very well in terms of the build. I haven't really made any changes since we last spoke. The thing that you've probably noticed is that these tubes, or at least this tube, is quite flex. Is that a word? Is quite flex? Is quite flexible, whereas these are quite tight. And the reason for this is because I sort of forgot that with a pump like this, it is quite difficult to actually fill up. So what I am going to do is have this mounted all the way at the top here, but as you can probably see, I can't really push it there at the moment because we do need to actually fill this from the top, and the only way that that's going to be possible is to actually do this from a lower height. We're working with soft tubing today just because it is a whole lot easier than hardline. You don't need to worry about bends or special tools. It pretty much sorts itself out. Just be aware that you don't want any kinks, otherwise you can run into some issues, but otherwise it is very easy to work with because you can just cut all of your lengths with scissors. You will be needing some fittings. These are part of the HydraX system. They come in a range of colors. I've used the chrome ones before, but as I say, these are the white ones. And it's very simple the way it works is you just need to grab this little end piece, you slide it onto the tube, then you grab your fitting and you just push it over the top of the tube all the way down so that it touches the end. And then when you screw it up, this actually forms a very nice seal on top of the tube. It clamps it down in place, and then you'll see that there is this little rubber O-ring here at the end as well, and this is what's going to create a seal on the other end of your component, let's say your GPU block, and that is of course what's going to allow your water to go all around your PC without coming out and leaking everywhere. That's not to say it's not a possibility, but it's normally going to be human error, to be honest, that's going to cause any problems rather than, I don't know, tolerances with the products themselves. Let's do one for real now, shall we? So we've grabbed our fitting, we slide our tubing on the top, grab the end and get that nice and tight. Line it up with our next fitting, so we'd probably want to cut around about here. Obviously give yourself a little bit more room that you can then trim down rather than cutting it too short. Let's not forget this pump is eventually going to be quite a lot higher, so I need to make sure that it is actually going to be able to fit its eventual position, not its current one. It's quite a difficult one to gauge, to be honest, and unfortunately a little bit of guesswork is required. Screw, screw, screw. And there we have a loop. Quite a few curves. I wanted it a little bit curvy. I think if you go for nice straight lines, it doesn't really work with soft tubing, and then it looks like hard line, but something's not quite right. I like to exaggerate the soft tubing. Double check everything is nice and tight, one at a time. Please don't skip this step. Please, please. Power supply can go in. Oh, I've smudged my Valentine's Day text. Painting's not my thing. XPG have actually provided some really cool RGB power cables. You're going to get all of the bling. It's a standard extension and it powers over, what's that, addressable RGB. I do believe it's time to actually start the filling process though, which is always the most nerve-wracking bit because, well, you're pouring the water. I think it will be okay, but for every fill, there must be a drain. And you've probably noticed that there isn't actually a drain valve fitted to this explicitly, which isn't ideal. I think this would have actually looked quite nice if we'd had a little tap here. But I don't think it's actually going to be a problem with this build though, because our fill port is located here at the top. And this is the only bit of the loop that won't actually spill everywhere if you don't do the cap up. So the theory is that we take the cap off, and then we'll just be able to connect this once more, turn the whole thing upside down, and it should start draining from the top rather than the bottom. We are going to be flushing out the loop first when we test that it works with just some, well, this is distilled water. It says it's superior non-conductive fluid. And then for the real deal, we are actually going to add this cryo fuel, which is this solid fluorescent pink. It's not going to be the best thing for longevity if you're trying to actually recreate something that's going to last years and years, but for this more show build, I think it's going to look perfect. We start here with our out from the pump, straight into the CPU block, radiator, GPU, back to the pump. The water's going to be moving so fast anyway that it's not going to make any real difference. Everything should be quite a neutral temperature, I guess. Oh, I need to go and get a washing up bowl now, don't I? It's covered in my lunch. It's like covered in noodles and stuff. That's grim. If I was a professional, I'd have one that didn't actually live in my kitchen, but I'm not. You should put some kitchen paper down by your PC, just so if something is leaking, it makes it a lot easier to actually see where the leak has occurred. Do not plug your power supply into your computer at all, because this could be the difference between a leak killing your system and it not. Here goes nothing. Just a little bit at first. Seems to be doing the job. So we're going to turn it on for just a second and then turn it straight off. And we should see some water shooting out from the middle. Slightly awkward, but the bottom port can't actually be used as an inlet. That is for the temperature probe only, which means I've got to undo it all now.
Intermediate. Fluffy dog.
Very fluffy dog.
Fluffy, fluffy. Everywhere fluff.
Problem rectified. Now for the really fun bit, the coolant. And they do say on the instructions to mix it into the bottle, but I've heard that it's a lot more fun to actually put it into the top to show you guys the whole loop change color. Let's try not to get it everywhere. We have purple. Needs a bit more water though. That looks awesome, doesn't it? I absolutely love that fluid with the white fittings though. That really stands out. It's not quite as solid as I thought it was going to be, but actually It's a nice balance really between, well, a solid finish and one that's fluorescent. I am so sorry to keep teleporting around. It's been a bit of a weird old project. It's gone on for a long time. We're currently filming at 12:30 at night. I'm that committed to the cause. Also because the deadline for this is Valentine's Day and it's currently Friday. Or actually it's Saturday, isn't it? It's gone midnight. But I think that Murphy's Law definitely has applied to this build. And I'm going to walk you through everything that we've got so far because it works and it looks absolutely fantastic. I mean, have a load of this. We've got our full Valentine's Day build. I absolutely love the tubing and the coolant in this. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. It goes perfectly with all of our white fittings, all of our different white blocks, even the white RAM and board. It's fantastic. I actually picked up around about £10 some different color thumb screws. These were just off Amazon. And you can see they really do make the whole thing pop and they match the coolant. It looks really cool. We have our disaster area really of the paint on the front that actually has turned out all right in terms of the color that I was going for. Well, you can see what I was trying to do anyway and make the whole thing look a whole lot better. A couple of stickers on there because yes, this is the Valentine's Day build and they could be removed if you didn't actually want this to be a constant Valentine's Day build. But the build itself, the full loop, the PC, I'm really proud of. I think this is my nicest one to date. I pretty much nailed the theme if I say so myself. I would have preferred to have a white GPU and probably a white pump, but to be honest, the black pump is fine. It's more just the graphics card itself that doesn't quite work, but I've tried to neutralize that a little bit. But unfortunately, there is probably one of the most annoying issues that I've ever really come across when it comes to gaming PCs and custom loops and things. I'm going to show you this now, and to do that, we're going to have to get a little gaming setup going. We'll grab our XPG RGB mouse mat that they've sent out for this video. I love an RGB mouse mat, I do. We also require a keyboard, and we've got XPG's Summoner equipped with Cherry MX mechanical switches and plenty of RGB because we don't want the mouse mat to have all of the show, now do we? Is there a better noise out there than mechanical keyboard? But then we're going for some high-res audio with the Precog gaming headset from, you guessed it, XPG. That's a nice amount of clamping force, I'll give them that. Very cozy. Plug it in. Is it going to work? Definitely haven't already used this PC. It works! Hooray! But as I say, there is a monumental issue to go through, and the only way you're actually going to discover this is by opening up a game. So here we have some Doom Eternal. This is running at 4K Ultra Nightmare maximum settings, and it feels absolutely incredible. This is a high refresh rate monitor, so we're getting all of the frame rate. This is definitely over 120. This is outstanding actually for what is essentially technically last gen hardware with that 2080 Ti. It is fantastic, and the thing that I love the most about liquid cooling PCs, and the reason I have one myself, is just because it is so quiet. You think how much load this is under at the moment, 100% on that GPU, and it's just doing its thing. No real change. I could probably tune it down a little bit more than that, to be honest. There's just not much noise going on. Take a look at our GPU utilization, around about 98, 97%, so we're properly using it, it's working flat out, and it's doing its job very nicely. And we're currently getting around about 50 degrees, 49 degrees on that GPU, which is absolutely incredible, and there is just no way that you'd be able to get that on any sort of normal cooling solution whatsoever. But look at those numbers even more closely. CPU is running at 32%, and it's way higher at 73 degrees. And this is really bizarre, and I couldn't quite work out what the problem was at first. I was wondering whether everything was fitted correctly, whether there was an issue with the loop. Logically speaking, a flat-out graphics card should never be a lower temperature than a CPU that's not idling but isn't really doing that much. The problem is that the CPU block and the motherboard are essentially not actually properly compatible, and the reason for that is because there's actually a tiny little capacitor right near the CPU block that the actual mounting mechanism is catching on. So I'm not sure whether it's Gigabyte's fault, Corsair's, a combination of the two, or nobody's, but ultimately, as good as this system looks, it's not really going to serve its purpose if you're getting around about 72 degrees on the CPU, because you could have just bought an air cooler, and if you've gone to all of this effort to put this together, to then find that you actually need to get yourself a new block or need to get yourself a new motherboard, you're not going to be a very happy bunny whatsoever. Oh, it would just be the worst thing, wouldn't it? The worst thing over something quite literally so tiny to get in your way. I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on this one. Do you think that this is the dream PC, capacitor issue aside? Do you absolutely love the colour scheme? Do you think that a Valentine's Day PC was quite a nice thing to do? Our XPG, amazing for sponsoring this? Or would you have done things differently? What theme would you like to see next? Please let me know down in that comment section below, and also smash the like button on this one and get subscribed. If you can give me some love on this one, I'd appreciate it. How about that? Thank you so much for watching though, I really appreciate it. All of the links to everything featured are down in the description below. But thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.